the first steps toward change. And this is the thought that drove us towards organizing this panel discussion. Now, as we all know, sexual harassment at workplace is one of the most noxious problems that our country is facing today. And unfortunately, it doesn't just attack the human dignity of the victim, but also results in the toxic and hostile work environment. And with all the things that are happening around us lately or have already happened around us, we realize that there is a lack of awareness about the nuances of the Posh Act amongst the students. So here's a small effort from Wiki Maharashtra in spreading the knowledge through this panel discussion. Firstly, I'd like to thank all our wonderful panelists for agreeing to be a part of this discussion and willing to share with us their valuable knowledge. Thank you, everyone. Let me just jump into introducing them. First, we have amongst us Ms. Samanika Rawat, who is a certified career coach, internationally accredited mediator, and has assisted numerous recruiters in the past with skilled profiles. We welcome you here, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have amongst us Ms. Trisha Tishrayashi, who is a recent graduate and is a corporate commercial lawyer based out in the states of Jharkhand and Orissa. We welcome you, Trisha. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We have Ms. Parishkriti, who is a final year student of LLB specializing in business laws. She has also completed her majors in psychology and English literature from University of Delhi. She founded Niti Shastra, where she assists law firms and advocates in finding suitable interns and job candidates in easing their hiring process. We welcome you, Parishkriti.
Thank you for
joining. Next, we have Ms. Tosha, who is an upcoming corporate lawyer and a recent graduate. She has worked as a paralegal and has headed Trial and Appellate Society of her college for 2 years. We welcome you, Tosha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Isha, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now we have Advocate Govida Priyam, who specializes in sexual harassment at workplace, and she is an external member to 13 ICs and is a Posh expert. She has also been working with various organizations across India on different aspects of Posh compliance. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Last but not the least, we have Ms. Divya, who has started working as a legal officer with the Lawyers Collective, Women's Right Initiative, and Chambers of Ms. Indira Jaisingh, specializing in sexual harassment at workplace and domestic violence laws in 2015. Ms. Divya is the Assistant Dean of O.P. Jindal Global University. She has been the Member Secretary for the Committee on Gender Sensitization Against Sexual Harassment since 2016, and is also responsible for all the compliance, diversity, training, and inquiry processes for students, faculty, and staff. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Same here, ma'am. I'd like to state a few statistics over here. In an All India survey on higher education conducted by the Ministry of HRD in 2019, there were 993 universities, 39,931 colleges, and 10,725 standalone institutions listed on the AISHE web portal. Total enrollment in the higher education was estimated to be 37.4 million and 19.2 million males and 18.2 million females. The women constitute 48.6% of the total enrollment. And hence, it becomes very important for us to learn about the application and the compliance of the anti-sexual harassment laws in the colleges and higher educational institutions. Now, without further ado, let's just jump right into this discussion. So as we all know, along with the Posh Act, we have University Grants Comission Regulations of 2015, which also apply to all the higher education institutions in India to prevent, prohibit, and redress incidents of all the gender-based violence against employees and also students. In fact, it is a gender-neutral law for all the students. So not only women, but also male students and also the third gender students can file a complaint of sexual harassment at workplace in the universities according to the UGC Regulations 2015. Now, I'd like to start this discussion with Tosha, Trisha, and Parishkriti here. Now, we as students have various questions regarding the scope of the Posh Act, be it whether interns are covered under the Posh Act, or is there any other law that prevents redressal to a grievance? I'd like to ask my first question as to whether these laws are taught as a subject to you and our college is actually complying with the rules? Tosha, we can start with you.
Yeah. So in my university, what happened was it is clubbed with IPC. So IPC paper 2 is one of the paper, and it was clubbed with POXO Act and this Posh Act. But unfortunately, because the IPC and POXO is a bit huge of a subject that is to be taught over a semester, so the Sexual Harassment Act was not really covered in our college. So we were just given insights as to like what is local committee that is formed or what is internal committee. It's just the grits about the law, which doesn't make sense to a common person, definitely. So the students were basically asked to go and just to read on their own, because probably the mindset they have, like they just know what a law is, so they can definitely like just interpret such a easy law. So it is being taken as an easy law to like this is what I feel, that it is being taken not so seriously in the universities. So I believe that that is why the cases are also rising.
Trisha, would you like to share your insights on the same?
Sure. So even though UGC mandates establishing ICC or raising awareness about recourse in harassment cases, training ICC members or sensitizing the campus about these issues, sexual harassment issues, most institutions, what I have come across is that they look at this as a mere formality, boxes to be ticked, let alone the students be frequently informed or the policies be frequently updated, and to help them understand and recognize the forms of harassment is still a long foreseen thing. And as a matter of fact, if you look at some statistics on Delhi-based institutions, these researches, they show that about 75% female students are unaware about most sexual harassment forms in the first place and redressal mechanisms. And about law schools in general, I think Posh is usually offered as an elective subject. Posh has already mentioned, she has given a detailed insight on it. I'll just add on to it that Posh is offered as an elective subject, that too if the institution or the faculty wishes to offer it. And so that is a case to be noted. That is it.
Parishkriti, would you like to share some insights on how the colleges comply with the norms and the rules of the POSH Act and the UGC rules?
So at my current university, I think only previous year we were taught a subject which was optional, and it was called Women and Criminal Laws. And this was a subject where we were taught different laws like rape laws, harassment laws, abortion laws. So POSH was something which is covered in 1 or 2 lectures. But I guess it was a law school, so it was still covered. But during my graduation in University of Delhi, this is something that was not even brought up, and it was a women's college. We did not know that ICC was something that had to be there. It is something that only I came to know during my law school years. So I think this is something that has to be talked about a bit more.
I would like to add on to what Parishkriti said. I also believe that this law should be taught in every law school, like not just law schools, but also in engineering or any BCom or any normal graduation subject. It should be like a part of curriculum for all the undergraduates. So this is what I believe, and I also believe that my friends who are there in other fields of profession, they haven't come across any such curriculum.
In fact, I agree with you. In fact, we have students from other professions as well joining us on YouTube today. So I hope this discussion helps them a lot. Now, moving ahead, we all have interned at places. We all have worked at places in this pandemic. Now, since this pandemic has started since last year, we have the concept of virtual internship seems to have taken over the students' interests, right? So I'd like to ask, do you think that the sexual harassment takes place in the virtual world? And do you think that students are aware that virtual workplace also is included under the POSH Act?
If I may.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so I believe it is a bit more easier for students to let go of the harassment that goes through during the virtual space, while it's still easier to figure out when somebody is touching you inappropriately. It's very easy to ignore inappropriate comments or messages, and this is something that I'm sure a lot of us have done, be it professionally or personally. So during the virtual space, I think internships have the scope of more and more harassment. But personally, I feel that if we maintain a professional environment, and if all the conversations that are happening are happening through a professional mode, this is something that reduces the scope of harassment, as to say.
Yes, I agree. In fact, considering sexual harassment is subjective, it also becomes there's a gray area as to what constitutes a sexual harassment. So I guess that also contributes to the fact that people get away in a virtual space more than what happens in offline mode. Tosha and Prisha, would you like to add on to this question?
Yes, definitely. So I would also like to highlight the point that virtual sexual harassment is not something new that has been like coming up. And I believe even like in my internship experiences, I would like to mention one of them. I was interning in a whole men-dominated law firm, so I didn't know. I didn't do my due diligence before going. So apparently, I got to know that there was only one female associate associated with the firm. So, but she was busy in the working hours in the courts, and she used to go to like she used to represent the firm everywhere. So she was quite busy. So what happened was over the time, like my nature is kind of very jolly and I mix up with people pretty quick. So that's my kind of tendency that I like to know what other associates have come, like what is their background, what do they like have a vision about what their profession should look like and all of that. So eventually I made a couple of young associates as my friends and acquaintance. So one time it happened like like one of the guys started texting me on Facebook. He like abhi tak soi nahi ho, why are you so up late and all of that. But I did not like, I do not count them as such close friends, but yeah, professionally we are like known to each other. So and there was one more like incident. It was an offline kind of a harassment. I'm not sure if it was harassment, but I would request the other panelists, senior panelists, to just address it. Like one of my friend was interning in a law, I think in an advocate's office. So what really happened was that she wore a pencil skirt, which was of around knee length. So she didn't know she had to go to court that day. So eventually she got to know after like around 12 o'clock that she needs to go to court. So definitely she won't be changing just for going to court. So finally she went there, and after the whatever task they had to do in court, the filing and all of that was done. And while returning, the lawyer kind of mocked at her by saying that like what are you wearing, and you know, what are you wearing, and skirts to ladkiyan nahi pehnti hai, bacche log pehnte hain. And she had to live with that like for another 28 days, because I believe that that was like the first week of internship, and definitely nobody would like to leave the internship in such a manner. And definitely it is not so easy to get internships, as we all know. So I believe that virtual harassment is nothing new. It existed even before pandemic hit the whole world. And offline harassment was pretty common, as everybody knows. Trisha, if you would like to continue.
So allow me to begin with iterating that sexual harassment is not limited to physical settings. Now, there are two issues I'd like to shed light on here. First is recognition of the acts as to what constitutes sexual harassment. And second is redress. And despite having laws in place to prevent sexual harassment in higher educational institutions or even in companies and law firms which have ICC or which follow the Posh Acts, lesser importance has been given to virtual harassment as compared to hardline sexual harassment as a term. And this is followed by reluctance to report this harassment also. And another issue is that whether sexual harassment policies extend to acts outside the institution. That, of course, includes internships, competitions, events, moot court competitions, and all. And although a lot of institutions and companies have policies in place for such issues, thus allowing such complaints to be admitted, but then there is no uniform legislation in place to uniformly address them all. It varies from company to company, organization to organization, institution to institution, and that becomes a gray area again. And moreover, whether circulation of videos or screenshots of chats, etc., in an all-male public group will constitute to sexual harassment is not similarly another gray area that I want to bring up. Now, as such, for me, recognition of forms of sexual harassment is one substantive way to redress sexual harassment in higher educational institutions and workplaces in general too. So that is all from me.
I think I could pitch in here if Isha may allow me to.
Yes, Gautama.
I think very relevant points made by Trisha and Parishkriti and Tosha. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. One thing that we fail to acknowledge is that no particular law or no particular legislation works in isolation. They are always supplemented by certain rules that are being brought about by the GUGC or the Ministry of Women and Child Development or the courts lending judgments. So where it comes to virtual workplace and the harassment that is happening at the virtual workspace, this is not a new phenomenon. It did not come in with the setting of the pandemic. As Trisha rightly pointed out, it has been prevalent for a very, very long time. In fact, there are various judgments of the high courts that enumerate this point that no, the workplace does not only stretch to your, brick and mortar spaces that you work in, it stretches to the virtual medium as well. One such judgment is, I think, Saurabh Kumar Malik की judgment आई थी Delhi High Court से, I think, जहाँ पे ये बोला गया था कि virtual workspaces maybe if you're texting your employee or asking for sexual favors after hours, that would also be encompassed in the Posh Act for the to promulgate the intent of the legislature. We are trying to stop, so you cannot put these scriptures around something like sexual harassment that time nahi tha office ka ya brick and mortar wali jagah pe to nahi hua sexual harassment, right? Even texting, and a lot of sexual harassment in my experience happens on texting, on WhatsApp and Zoom meetings and stuff like that. So yes, the pandemic did highlight a problem that was underlying in this situation, but it is absolutely obnoxious to think that this did not exist before the pandemic, or there are not sufficient judgments on it. So if you isolate the Posh Act and you're only aware of the Posh Act as such, of course you will not know these finer terms that are being redressed by the mechanisms that are in place. And one very important thing is that if you're not training your employees or your IC team, how are they supposed to be aware of these latest judgments coming in place? If you don't have somebody who's keeping a tab on these things, then of course you will miss out the point of the whole intention of the legislature. So I think, yes, it is very, very true that sexual harassment, in fact, in my experience, mostly takes place on virtual mediums. You ask people out on coffee, that also amounts to sexual harassment. Also touching upon the point where somebody said that sexual harassment is very vaguely defined in the acts because it is a very subjective experience. For example, for a conduct that might be welcomed by me might not be welcomed by the person next to me, right? So it is a very subjective experience, and hence it is very difficult to circumscribe it into certain words, because if you circumscribe something into certain words, people find ways to go around the blurred lines and do it irrespective. And a very, very recent example we've seen where people who are familiar with the law would just use certain terms that don't appear to be sexually harassing, but you can't go on and say that the person did not feel sexually harassed. And I think there was a 2010 judgment by the Delhi High Court that clearly highlights that it is a subjective experience and your intent does not matter. The perpetrator's intent is absolutely irrelevant. What is material is that what did the victim feel at that point of time? Was she sexually harassed? What did she feel like she was targeted or sexualized in some way? So I think it is very, very important to understand that you cannot circumscribe something like sexual harassment in a few words. And so that is why the term is very, very vaguely defined. And of course, it is evolving with the laws that are coming in, the judgments that are coming in, the courts are taking actively participating into telling the scriptures like IC का role भी limit हो गया है, moral policing नहीं करेगी अब IC, अब ऐसे judgments आए हैं. So of course we are coming up with a lot of judgments and the courts are participating in, further laying the way. And what is of essence here is that we keep ourselves updated. And it is very, very sad that even in legal institutions, people are not really taking this law seriously, because you don't realize that it is not just one person who's being impacted. If you see, if women are excluded from a whole profession altogether, much so in a profession like the law, the legal profession, then representation will be lesser. And then who is supposed to protect us from, these menaces in the industry? And ऐसा नहीं होता है कि sexual harassment सिर्फ victim के ऊपर ही impact karta hai. A lot of females around her may choose not to go to that organization because they heard incidences of such things happening at a particular organization. So if you're barring your organization from implementing these laws, you're actually barring your organization from further inclusivity and diversity. And to me, that is very, very important. I've been working with organizations and I see that active participation actually helps, especially considering that any organization does not cater to, only male people. Of course, even if you are a brand that is made for male, suppose you're a shaving company and most of your employee, client base is male. Some female might be buying your products to give to a male. So you also have clients of the female. And if your brand is as such labeled to be misogynistic or, not really forward in that aspect, I think you're hampering your own business with that. Those are my 2 cents. Thank you for letting me speak.
Ma'am, in fact, I agree with you, the fact that there have been a lot of judgments. In fact, recently, Sikkim High Court in 2020 had observed that definition of workplace under the Posh Act is an inclusive one and not an exhaustive one. So there is always a scope for, because since it's subjective also, so there's always a scope for including any.
Absolutely. And you see, how they have defined it is the first and foremost intention that comes out of the legislatures is that any workplace that you visit in terms of your contractual obligation of employment, right? So in terms of that, any premises that you visit or any meeting that you're doing online, if suppose we are working on this platform and we are all here talking about Posh law, right? This is a contractual obligation that we all had. We all agreed that, yes, we will come here. If somebody was to come and troll us here, of course, this is also covered within workplace, because I wouldn't have been interacting with all of you people had I not agreed to this discussion, right? So even these spaces are well within the scope of workplace as such. And I think in the future, if question arises, I think the courts are also very, very clear on their stand that, any place that you are at, be it virtual or brick and mortar, if you are there on the terms of your employment, I think it is very well covered under Posh.
A follow-on question would be, a lot of interns, like a lot of us intern at places, work at a lot of law firms, or any considering people from other professions are also here with us. They also work at their workplaces. One thing I would like to ask is, are unpaid interns or are unpaid workers, do they come under the ambit of Posh Act? Because remuneration, a lot of students seem to have a doubt whether remuneration is an important aspect in filing a complaint with an IC.
See, first of all, let's understand that the Posh Act applies pan-India on every workspace. Of course, there are unorganized and organized sectors, and the organized sectors have to comply with the Posh Act. By that, you mean there are certain requirements. For example, you have to have an IC team, you have to file an annual report. Those are for the organized sector. But you cannot go on and say that unorganized sector pe Posh Act apply nahi karta. Even your house is a workplace for your domestic workers. So this is also encompassed in the Posh Act. It is just that every house does not need to have an internal committee or file annual reports. So where you don't understand that every place where a person visits, owing to their work or their contractual obligation under an employment agreement or a contract, is a workplace, right? Now coming to the fact that employees में covered होते हैं या नहीं interns, I think section 2F होता है of the Posh Act that defines employees, and it's clearly mentioned that trainees or apprentices are also covered under the Posh Act under the term employee. Now, what is another thing that is material here is that an aggrieved woman, as defined under the Posh Act, does not have to be an employee in the organization where the complaints are being lodged. The respondent has to be a part of the organization where the IC is sitting and inquiring into the dispute. आपका क्लाइंट भी अगर आपके यहाँ आता है जो कि आपके कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल एम्प्लॉयमेंट में नहीं आता है, your client is also sexually harassed in your premises or by your employee, they also have a right to come and register a complaint with you, right? So it's not that even if you're not, being provided any remuneration, material. Any woman who comes and alleges that she has been sexually harassed at your workplace is entitled to have an inquiry done under the Posh Act, and the law is immensely clear on that. So any doubt, of course, interns are explicitly covered under the Act. So for anybody who thinks that they are not covered or your remuneration nahi mil raha hai, anyways, legal fraternity mein most of the internships are unpaid, right? You cannot bar students from taking benefits of these laws that are meant for their own protection. It is very, very clearly written down in the law. Otherwise, also any woman can be an aggrieved woman. Your client, your domestic worker, your sanitation workers, or anybody who comes to your workplace and is sexually harassed by an employee of your organization has the right to seek redressal with your internal committee. I'm sorry if I missed any points, just correct me. Or
no, ma'am. Thank you for the insights. Ma'am, I guess Divya ma'am has something to say.
Yes, Isha. Firstly, thank you so much for everyone to making it, making the law adequately clear here. Despite being a legal practitioner, because I assume that this is university students, and because I also teach at not just the law school but also a liberal arts school. The reason I would be slightly more liberal in my conversation and not restricted to the legalese is because a lot of time non-law students feel very isolated in wanting to discuss or approach the law simply because they feel that the entire conversation is centered around the law, and this conversation is done and initiated by lawyers who are visibly more empowered about knowing the law. Okay, so that is where I start and begin with. So at least where I see the role of ICs, and I'm on the IC for a couple of universities and I do trainings for all of them. With regard to the definition of what a workplace is, a workplace has been, in a thorn in cases of sexual harassment since its very inception. It's a fairly new law. Of course, there has been adequate clarification on the workplace, but with regard to students, when you look at the UGC guidelines, I'll also refer to the UGC Saksham guidelines because that is a document which should be heavily relied on by ICs of universities and students because it is written in a manner to make it clear and more understandable for each and every individual. And it's a set of guidelines that direct you to what ought to be. So something I can tell you from my experience is that reporting has gone up significantly with cases online, which is a great thing for me because I understand that when reporting goes higher, that means an organization is creating enough provision for students or individuals to come report about a matter. With regard to university students, there's a lot of other technicalities within the workplace that come up. The UGC rules are, of course, very wide in the definition of what a workplace is. The campus, the so-called definition of the campus within the UGC guidelines is pretty exhaustive, and it covers a range of activities from cultural fests, sports meets, and even internships, because a lot of universities are the ones facilitating these internships. So that would come under the broader definition of what a workplace is. Even not, you're part of an internship, not as an individual, but a lot of times as a part representing an organization. For example, if I intern, I'm a student of the Melbourne University interning at place A and B, right? So that's something there. And also something that's very unique, which I feel is a problem, where a definition of the campus needs to be understood by the students, is when you're in a university, your relationship is much wider. Online, there's a lot more collaboration going on these days. A university is not the conventional form of a classroom anymore. Most of my collaboration, even outside the university space with students, is online. I teach in a university campus that is entirely a residential campus. There are these hybrids. There is a residential campus, it can be a residential mixed with a day campus. So there are all of these there are all of these permutations and combinations. And something that has come up when you read the UGC guidelines, the UGC rules, the Saksham guidelines altogether, something that has to be understood very clearly by the students who are trying to interpret the law and understand the law, is that while accepting cases, when an IC at a university accepts cases, uh, there is a very important technicality that needs to be understood more so now, because we're doing a lot more work online. The law, of course, provides for interpretation to, cases be from the virtual world to be read with other acts, but that's not something that every individual or every student understands. Also, especially in India, where within universities also there is a lot of diversity. I teach at a global university. The way some of my students can be explained the law is not the same as when I am an IC member for a university in Jharkhand, or a IC member at a university in Bangalore. It's a very different language we all speak in terms of understanding the law. So, as of today, the way classrooms in universities are evolving, a university relationship between students, employees, teachers, it continues to operate as such outside the physical campus. And all of this is a part, all of this collaboration work is part of the course of employment. And thus, it is important for an IC to understand and entertain even matters which are beyond this so called jurisdiction that we understand, to undertake and take these cases up and put light on how a victim, not a female victim, not a male victim, but how a victim feels. I teach at a liberal arts school, and I cannot introduce, law schools are not the majority of the country and cannot be taught. I cannot teach the Posh Act literally to everyone, but when I teach about sexual harassment in my liberal arts class as a lawyer, I try to use gender neutral terms. My classroom will not talk about, if a woman gets harassed, I understand. I will start my conversation that yes, women are a minority and a more vulnerable section of the society in cases ABC, but let's also talk about other vulnerable societies. Because in an engineering college, you already see, I've been in an IC in an engineering college. In an engineering college in India, there's already fewer women. There's already lesser conversation about uh, gender sensitivity, behavior that's inappropriate. Sexual harassment's a long way ahead. So you have to create more gender classrooms, and like all of us are talking about it from a very women centric approach. It becomes women centric the minute you start talking about the law as women. That's what happened in 2013 when the law was written, right? And so when you talk about it like that, for a layman student, I'm like a teacher, so I'm sorry I go on about talking about it like that. But when I am a random student, a student from, let's say, I'm doing a BCom honors, when I listen to this conversation for the first 10 minutes, I tune in, oh, all these lawyers talking about sections, I've heard women 5 times, I've already auto tuned out of that conversation. And I see that happen with my students. So yes, so I think maybe trying to make it a more hands-on approach to trying to understand what a campus means and what jurisdiction is. If we can simplify it in our conversation, it seems more palatable to a student. That's one thing I would like to add about at least how an IC, how students can approach. If students want to feel more empowered, they can write to their universities or whoever the authority is, that look, how is this, what I'm facing, a part of my course of employment? I'm interacting with the teacher or a fellow student on Facebook or MS Teams or Outlook, and they're talking to me in a manner which is inappropriate. Can you help me out? Create that comfort in a student's mind to say that, yes, this is a part of your employment. Your collaboration on projects with a student on Instagram is very much a part of your university work, so that they're comfortable in approaching a forum. So I think that's the beginning of that conversation. I'm sorry, I know I talk too much when I'm, it's like teaching a class. I'll end it there.
No, ma'am. In fact, it was a very insightful thought. I'd like to add on to that, and I would like to ask, how do ICs in universities handle complaints that are filed by the students, or would you like to share some instances without, of course, revealing the names?
Yes. So it's again, I've been at the end of drafting policies for a lot of universities. Usually, organizations in universities. So, for example, I work with OP Jindal Global University, which has a policy on anti-sexual harassment, which is a university's policy, which is based on the UGC guidelines, the Workplace Act of 2013. So, most universities do have an act, an operative policy of their own, which would be, as the UGC suggests, on a website in all visible places. It should be posted. It will be a part of the HR policy or the student handbook or the faculty handbook, as it is. A standardized process would, one, be first that every IC should be, there should be an IC, there should be a working IC. There has to be a certain series of sensitization programs within the university to be able to educate. The UGC does mandate one every quarter, which comes out to be every semester, one every quarter, where there is a general conversation on gender sensitization, and then what an IC does, who constitutes the IC within a university campus. There has to be an ongoing conversation each time about, so for example, I'll tell you from how, when I receive a case, or if I were to draft a policy, uh, a clear policy that lays down who the IC members are, how you reach them. There should be, one of the questions to reach out is if there is an emergency on a campus, which does happen a lot. If there is a physical emergency, who do you approach? What is the confidentiality policy of a university, right? Uh, for students that I talk to, it's important to let them know, because again, the reason I'm being more general about it, Isha, and everyone else, is because every university has a different way of dealing with it. Ideally, there should be a clear policy which does state whether you're going to have an inquiry process or a conciliation process, with a clear understanding of what it is, a clear understanding of what the jurisdiction is. So it's very specific to every university. So if you tell me, if you maybe tell me this question in a lot more specific manner as to what you're looking for me to answer, I'll be able to do that. Ideally, if I would look at my university, something I've seen as a comparison in the 5-6 universities that I work with, a good system is to have an IC email or phone number that is posted and somebody can reach out to. So for example, in Jindal, we have a hotline number, which you can call at any point of time. It's 24 hours manned by the presiding officer and me. Uh, they call you up, they tell you this has happened to me. As an IC, you have to be equipped enough to have emergency numbers at a university in case there's a physical injury, or there is a physical intervention or an intervention from outside the university, maybe the police, that is required. After that, you first get to that person's mental health, talk to them about that, see what is their approach, whether they would like to go ahead with a complaint or not. But because there are also a lot of protocols in that, you have to give them a timeline. How many working days do you have to file a complaint, to write a written response? Ideally, then somebody should meet you and explain this process to you. So, and then I will tell them, if you want to go through an inquiry, what does it entail? So if I have a student who's come to me, let's assume, I'll give you a real time example of a case that has come, which will tell you what are the things a student should look at and what an IC should look at. So I've had a case which has come to me at the university level where there's been a party after hours in the campus to celebrate the winning of an event. There's been a physical fight that has broken out, and as a part of that, there's also a few complaints of sexual harassment. So I've got a call on this number saying that, this has happened. So my first approach should be, uh, first, whether this needs to be, if there is a part of assault, an IC will not be able to take up a matter if there is sexual assault or physical assault that has happened. If someone needs to be contacted, if you're inadequate to do that, if you need help, to call that person. Next step, if there is some medical assistance or mental health assistance that is required, something that's often ignored in universities. The reason I focus on that is it's often ignored that there is a protocol of mental health here. Because let's say that there is a victim of sexual harassment, there could be other triggers from a childhood, or triggers that could suddenly go off with this particular incident. So it's important to have a protocol in place where you ask these questions, and then you meet them, because going through an inquiry is a very painstaking process. It's not easy for an individual to just, it's important, it may seem like I'm talking a lot, but that's because I understand that all the people here understand that an inquiry process in 90 days happens like that. But when I meet a student who's just filed a complaint of sexual harassment, already has a taboo in their head where they can't tell anybody. They've not told their parents, they've not told a friend, because there's taboos attached to it. How difficult it is for an individual who does not understand the law to come talk about a complaint process and start it out in a university where they have to stay. So explain the process to them. The law really has to be, I've been practicing in courts for many years now, but the best way to go about the law is to break it down and tell someone. Each university, each organization has a different way of going about their processes, but that basic procedure of how, if you go into an inquiry, what all paperwork is required, how many days in which you get a written response, what does it mean to have a written response, uh, what do you have to be mentally prepared to. I have a lot of students who come into an inquiry process and they've not been prepped enough, that you're going to be asked personal questions and they mentally break down. So there has to be someone in the ICC who is preparing you for what comes ahead, because a lot of cases get withdrawn midway because victims are not able to deal with the mental pressure. So within, it's important to talk about that. Of course, there's a process that you have. Explain the process, go through the law, break it down for them, but most importantly, talk about what is absolutely necessary and how the process is going to go ahead. So yeah, that's there. I mean, of course, this has 100 combinations of answers to it, but yes, this for me is the starting point of this question.
Yes, I agree, ma'am. Actually, in fact, people tend to forget that every time the victim has to repeat the story, she revisits the trauma, and she has to revisit the pain that she went through the first time. So I guess people tend to forget the toll it takes on the victim's mind during the inquiry process. Now, my next question would be: we as students sometimes require guidance with respect to navigating through university or landing internships or jobs, etc. We have Samanika ma'am here, who is a legal career coach, and my question to her would be that, since you help and mentor students like us, what do you think is a due diligence that students or that we should do before joining a workplace? Also, have you come across any instances of your mentees being harassed or stalked at workplace?
So luckily, Isha, most of the students whom I have sent for internship last year, it was through Law Seco, and because I was the head of placements there, so we used to do some kind of diligence beforehand. Like we used to speak to the person and see, and ask other people also who've interned with that person in the past, or most of them were actually our connections or places where we knew somebody had interned in the past. However, there were a few places where we used to engage for the first time. And luckily, touchwood, luckily, none of the places I got a complaint with respect to harassment as such. The only complaint I received was where people were given more amount of work than they could handle during online internships, and then I had to intervene and speak on their behalf to the recruiters that either you allow this person to go because they may not be able to work as per your standards, so there's no point forcing the student to continue, or at least you try to understand that not all five fingers are of the same size. So just because one intern of yours is able to submit, let's say, 5 articles,
day, you would be expecting the same from everyone. So that's how we used to come up with a mid path. There were a few places, not few actually, there was only one place where only one girl had told me that we had already sent a lot of girls at that place earlier also. She said that because she needed a break and she did not get it in the right manner, she felt uncomfortable. Okay. Now, there was no incidence of harassment here. She just said the kind of words which were used were something she was not very comfortable with. And she said that maybe another person who's sensitive might not be able to take this. Okay. She said, I am sensitive. That's why it hurt me. And maybe somebody else who is sensitive like me may not be able to take this. So, ma'am, you please take care of this. So I ensured that after that, to the same person, I stopped sending students whom I knew that like may not be able to take the way he was expecting, like the harsh man. Now, in the legal field, especially the lawyer, not every kind of pressure is harassment, right? But yes, we do understand the atmosphere is such that pressure is everywhere. We can't escape that. ठीक है, अगर हम ऐसे बोलेंगे कि मतलब बहुत ही स्मूथ कर दो, तो they'll stop taking interns. They are also like, because they are not offering mentorship, they are kind of offering internship where they feel that we are giving you an opportunity to learn. Like we are not getting something in return. Of course, they do get, like, you offer them help in research, you offer them in like in during your physical internship and clerical assistance and all. So that way, we had to look for a mid path. Luckily, at that point of time, I did not. Right now, I'm not looking after recruitments. I'm purely focused into mentorship. But the other part of your question, where you said how to look for due diligence part, that becomes very important. Now, what is happening these days is I've seen a lot of young students, like third year students, have started offering internships. Like every second person on LinkedIn is a founder or a co-founder or CEO of some brand or the other, and people end up getting into this trap. Okay, now it is your responsibility that if you are applying for any particular place, you as any student, and most importantly as a law student, you have to do the diligence. You guys are lucky that these days every organization is available on LinkedIn. Every important person of the organization is available on LinkedIn because they are looking for B2B and B2C clients. Okay, now just open their professional page and just see how many active interactions have been there, how active is the page or the profile. Could be an account also. Now look after the people who are working there and look after the kind of activity they're engaged in. Okay, wahi se you'll get to know whether this person is a shady person or a secure person. Secondly, the moment somebody posts that I have a internship opportunity, do not start entering interested or start giving your email IDs publicly. Okay, even if you're saying I'm interested, firstly check the profile. I recently saw like some students posting opportunities, and now I really want to call up these bluffs. Honestly, like I'm fed up now because for past 1 year I had been seeing this. Now I'll start going and writing on their post, this is a bluff, please stop doing this. Because what I've started doing is whenever I see a student posting a co-founder or a founder, and I just check their profile and they're like 23 batch students or something, I simply ask them, are you looking for an intern or are you looking for a freelancer? There was this third year student who had posted an internship opportunity, and I saw somebody who had cleared CA first level with a, I think, 70 to 80% marks. And that girl had commented they're interested. I was like, are you going to intern with somebody of your age or who is maybe even younger to you? Okay, there's no harm if the person is what do I say, qualified enough to give you that opportunity. Like I have had mentors in college days who were like 1 or 2 years senior to me, but then do not do these internships for the sake of certificate. What exactly are they giving you? Are they qualified enough? When I asked this third year student, are you qualified enough to give an internship certificate? She said, ma'am, I wanted to share my knowledge with my juniors, which I couldn't get. Firstly, I wanted to ask in third year, have you acquired all the knowledge that you can give to your juniors? Secondly, why don't you specify that you are looking for first or second year students whom you can train? Thirdly, and most importantly, if you're a law student, if you really want to train juniors, find out juniors from your own college. You just have to send 2 mails to your first and second year batch saying, I'm looking for people whom I can train. Please come join me. Do not put it on social media and start bluffing people. Okay, this is one thing. So when you are applying, it is your responsibility to check their profiles thoroughly. Secondly, the organization from where this entire that debate started, conversation started happening, and like where we all saw the kind of messages which were getting exchanged. Now, when I saw their LinkedIn page, the page itself gave me that shady vibes. Like that morning itself, when people started writing, and it was actually for some other lawyer. The first post was for somebody else. From there, people from other organizations started picking and speaking. Right now, you have to first check their pages, and when you apply for internship, now this is the most important thing you have to do. When you apply for an internship, when your internship gets approved, whether it is on WhatsApp or whether it is on email, does not matter. A lot of students are saying later on, pehle wo accept kar lete hain that we got a message over WhatsApp, your internship is confirmed, we are very happy, and then later on they say there was no formal email. That is completely fine if they are confirming it over WhatsApp, because everybody is in a hurry these days. What you have to do is ask them for an official email where you can share your profile with them. Okay, in that email itself, ask them, or even if you're exchanging WhatsApp, ask them, sir, what would be the expected work hours? Okay, here is a very important lesson for you all, because litigation mein it is understood that kai baar aisa ho jata hai that agar Monday morning filing hai and the senior is working till 3 in the night with the entire team, they might even expect you to work. Okay, which is completely okay if and only if you are comfortable with it, and if and only if you were told about it from the beginning that yes, you are going to work with me and there might be certain incidences where we might need you for emergency hours. But I'm not saying that this should happen every day, firstly. Secondly, that everybody would be comfortable for that. If you're not, just say that, sir, I'm available for 7 to 8 hours, these are my college hours, and from this time to this time I'm available. Whatever work you want me to do, I can do that. Otherwise मेरा body cycle हिल जाता है, and like I cannot work beyond, let's say, 10:30 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. whatever you are comfortable with. Right, पहले खुद को compromise मत करो कि अच्छा मेरे को certificate नहीं मिलेगा, मेरे को internship नहीं मिलेगा, let me say yes for everything, and then later on, because with one of the lawyers, when the harassment issue started popping up and the complaint was filed by the girl, I got a call from one of the boys who happened to be one of my students, and he said, ma'am, I have been interning at the same office, I got to learn so much from so many days, and we do sit every night till 1:30 to have our official discussions. Okay, now had these girls been made aware of this thing first day pe, they might not have felt very uncomfortable. Right, now when we are talking about Posh, we cannot escape few important things, that it is not just like, of course Posh would be limited to sexual harassment, but when we are talking about workplace related issues, mental harassment is something, or mental torture is something we all often tend to ignore. Right, now if we go by the, because the background of Posh started with Vishaka. Okay, and there was a very important para from Vishaka which is quoted everywhere. So I'll just quickly like read it out for those who are not aware. So it said, where any of the unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature, basically it was used, these acts are committed in circumstances under which the victim of such conduct has a reasonable apprehension that in relation to victim's employment or work, such conduct can be humiliating and may constitute a health and safety problem. It amounts to sexual harassment. Now here, if we go by the little meaning, yes, under Posh, we might have reduced the scope of this para. However, if for our personal purposes, if we are reading this and if we are looking for how can we prevent mental harassment or sexual harassment for ourselves, we have to focus on these words very, very importantly. Because we have to emphasize that, is it causing us an impression, which Isha had asked Kovida in the beginning also, that like हमें लगता है that direct certificate नहीं मिलेगा, direct employment effect होगा, internship stipend, all these things, if we start interlinking, no, they are not interlinked. The day, it was very clear from my end to my mentees last year when I was sending for internships in online mode, I used to say, the day you feel I'm uncomfortable, leave it right away, because there are 10,000 more organizations who are willing to offer you internships. Okay, here with respect to law students, why we get stuck is firstly underconfidence, that oh, I come, preconceived notion, I come from XYZ college, maybe if I say no for this internship, I may not get something else. Okay, first preconceived notion, a lot of students carry this. Second most important preconceived notion, that if I go for this internship and if I say anything wrong here, because the community is such that if I do not agree to certain things which ex-lawyer asks me to, maybe he will spread a wrong word in the like fraternity, and I may not be able to get an opportunity with the Y lawyer. Okay, so you start judging your value and judging your capabilities based on whether you're able to serve the requirements of one person or the other. Here, by serving, I mean official like work related favors and not personal favors. Okay, so these are the things you have to remove from your mind, that irrespective of whom I am interning with, पहले तो मुझे क्या सीखने को मिल रहा है, दूसरा चीज, how important is my dignity for myself. If your dignity is getting affected at any place, even if it is not sexual harassment, even if it is any kind of mental harassment also, just drop that opportunity then and there and start speaking about it. You do not have to start speak on a social media platform. You can simply reach out to the same person, drop an email saying that these are the things which have happened, and I'm extremely sorry to inform you that I did not like it at a professional front, because it happens. I have seen with people that they often don't realize कि उन्होंने क्या किया. I'll tell you, during one of my internships, this was a very young associate, and he was going for a client meeting. Okay, now he had given me a task to find out some documents. सारे मिल गए, एक बहुत important document नहीं मिल रहा था, and his partner had already left the office and he was waiting downstairs, and like they had to go for arbitration. दूसरा side से अमरचंद की party already पहुंच चुकी थी, so he was constantly getting calls and he started yelling, क्या हो गया, ये हो गया, वगैरह वगैरह. He just yelled like anything on me, पूरा गुस्सा मेरे ऊपर निकाल दिया. ठीक है, and then he left without the document. Whatever might have happened, I don't remember. And later on when he came back, he did apologize. Okay, so it happens. Legal field mein, I have seen a lot of people like treating interns like punching bags left, right and center. But if you did not like it, if it affected your mental health, because that is the first step. सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट बहुत बाद में आता है. पहले लोग ये देखते हैं कि हाउ वल्नरेबल आर यू, विल यू बी एबल टू लाइक take their drama very easily, or will you be giving like ekdam on the face of it ki no, no means no, right? So they do look for, like, these harassers do look for those vulnerable people who may not be able to speak. So the first moment when somebody affects your mental health in any manner, just stop them right there. Okay, now in an internship model, let's say you're interning, you have been assigned to an associate or a senior associate, then you would always know that there is one HR and a partner of that organization you can report to. Okay, if you're not comfortable with one person, always reach out to the other people of the organization, ask them to request them to move you to another team. Okay, because again, second major mistake we do as law students is, अच्छा किसी ने बोला कि इस फर्म में इंटर्नशिप करके उसको बहुत अच्छा काम मिला, इवन आई वुड वांट टू इंटर्न देयर एंड लर्न फ्रॉम देम. It is not organization specific, it is team specific, person specific learnings. Okay, so the second thing, when you say कि हमें background check कैसा करना है या how do we do the diligence, of course reach out to the people on LinkedIn who have interned at the same organization in the past, and while you're asking them how is this organization to work at, also ask them who are the people under whom you had interned. Okay, the good, bad, ugly, everyone. Just take पहले से ही note of what was the previous experience, and do not just ask one person. Ask at least 4 to 5 people who've interned at that organization. What kind of experience did they have? Because could be possible that it happened with one of my students. He's a Sardar, and he had some family celebration. So this recently happened, like after I think after I had left Flosico, or maybe in my last month of Flosico. So he was interning at a very reputed firm, and he was assigned a male associate, and some Ganpati puja tha ya kya tha. So the person left for the puja without informing the senior. Okay, now the next day the senior thrashed him left, right, center that we had a very important filing, where were you? So he kept on apologizing for a couple of days that, sir, mera galti tha, I couldn't inform you in the advance, but mera family ka bahut bada event tha, so I am ready to work on Sundays also, please let me know how can I help you. But that senior had taken it so personally that he kept on like showing it again and again and again. And then this guy came to me and said, ma'am, mera mental health bahut zyada affect ho chuka hai, now I can no longer tolerate this person. So the only way we had वहां पे was, I told him, why don't you approach the HR? Why don't you approach the senior person and ask them to move you to another team? If you're ready and willing to work, and if you're ready and willing to work at the same organization, then reach out to the HRs. So ये सारे छोटे छोटी चीजें ना आपको उस समय practically सोचना पड़ेगा, more than being emotionally affected. Yes, of course, with due respect, emotions, if you think that it is not a place you would want to work at any cost, right? That's an inner calling we get. At times we feel that ho gaya ab is organization ke sath I cannot work at any cost, whatever it may be, then you simply drop out. Koi problem nahi hai. There are so many more people who would be willing to teach you. However, if you want to continue, do not continue with the same person, and always make sure you communicate to the other person that this is what they did wrong. Now, when you talk about harassment, it reminded me of my sixth or seventh standard maths teacher. And there were certain things he had done during that time with some of the girls, which at that point of time we all felt uncomfortable with. But we were in sixth, seventh standard that we could never raise a voice about it, right? We didn't even understand what is happening and like what kind of statements is he making or like jo bhi cheez hai. So somehow he got to know that I'm studying law, and he came to congratulate me on Facebook. And that was the time I was like, okay, fine. Now, अच्छा आ जाओ, अभी आ जाओ तुम, अब बात करते हैं कि आप उस समय क्या करते थे, ठीक है? So when I mentioned all these things, of course, pura victim wala phase he took, and he started putting the blame back on me. You are a crazy woman, ye wo alana falana. But I did realize that उस दिन के बाद, उससे पहले तक I used to feel that probably this person never realized what he was doing. But when through his response, I got to know that it was all intentional, right? So it might happen that we can give the other person benefit of doubt that he is harassing us mentally and he may not be aware of it. So let us first from our side try to communicate to the other person, and then if अगर उसका गलती होगा, अगर वो genuinely unintentionally कर रहा होगा, he would apologize then and there and he'll stop. But अगर वो intentionally कर रहा होगा and he might be looking for vulnerabilities here and there, he would definitely try to cover up, put the blame back on you, and then you would have stronger grounds to put a complaint, right? So these are the like few pointers. I'm so sorry I took such a long time and got dragged because there were so many points I wanted to cover here. Yeah.
Ma'am, thank you so much. If I understand that it's already 6, but if all the panelists allow, can we extend the session for 15 more minutes? I can ask the last question to Kovida ma'am, and then we can take up participants' questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Ma'am, now that we have dealt with the experiences that the students have had, the awareness amongst the students, and what is the due diligence that the students need to do before joining an organization. One thing I'd like to ask is there any remedy available to the students if the employer or the IC of the university do not comply with the rules? And if so, is that penalty enough? Is that penalty grave enough?
See, when you're talking about the specific IC teams that are constituted under UGC guidelines make the IC team has a different configuration altogether, whereas in corporations or otherwise organizations that you might have 3 members from the organization and 1 external member. UGC regulates that you also have to have 3 nominated students in the IC team. So first, let's understand that the IC is not only people in the management that are coming and addressing. You will also have people under your own age group who might be more sensitive to the kind of issues that you are facing. So I in most cases, I would expect that these are very thoroughly investigated into. Once you don't have proper redressal, you also need to understand that these mandatory timelines have a purpose to it, right? ये जो 90 days में complete होने का जो procedure है, वो इसीलिए establish किया गया है क्योंकि एक तो speedy redressal हो इन complaints का और ये चीजें जल्दी redress हो जाएं ताकि और perpetrate ना करें. And secondly, it is also done so that you, in case you wish to go ahead and lodge a formal criminal complaint under the IPC, you can do that. Now, of course, there are provisions within the Posh Act, the UGC, the rules that the ministries come out with, and everything around Posh. Sab kehte hain appeal is favorable, appeal is favorable, appeal is favorable. But actually, they all say that as may be notified, and these notifications are not really very conspicuous. So we need to understand कि जहां आपको पता है कि आपकी appellate body क्या है, So please do take these complaints, and you can obviously approach the appellate structures. In case you do not know what appellate structures exist or where do you go with an appeal or something, you can always approach the local committee that is there in your particular district, or you can approach the police and lodge a complaint under 354 IPC. Or if you are studying in a state regulated organization, you can even approach the court, because अगर state body है तो फिर वो उसकी writ petition बन सकती है. So there are a lot of ways, and I do understand ये जो पूरा appeal का scenario है, because it is a very new law, as Divya rightly pointed out, and it is slowly evolving. Abhi a lot of districts के district officers are not very conversant with the laws, and they are not really very proactive when it comes to enforcing these laws and or creating awareness, जबकि उनकी duty है under the act कि आप awareness इसके बारे में कीजिए at certain institutes or what have you, NGOs के साथ partner करिए या जो भी. But in practicality, of course, there is very less awareness. That is why we are coming up with so many instances, and people are filing left, right, and center. Another very important point here is recently we saw MJ Akbar judgment coming out, where the judge clearly said that a woman, irrespective of however much time has elapsed, has absolute right to go to any medium she wishes to and expose what has happened with her, and no question shall be asked about it. So in case you are not left with any other remedy, because of course these all of these offenses are limitation barred, and you might exhaust that and you might not have a recourse, please understand that it is very necessary to speak up about such instances so that perpetrators can be identified at least. So I think a very good way to go about it is to approach the LC in case you haven't had a very good outcome of your complaints. Of course, all of these complaints and inquiries mein sab kuch is documented, and you have those documents. You can request for them and approach the LC, and maybe they can help you out. If in case you can't find the local committee, you can approach the National Commission for Women or the State Commission of Women, and maybe they can help you out. So there are a lot of bodies that are working in this field towards sensitization. Of course, as Divya pointed out, UGC does not discriminate on gender. It is for everybody, be it whatever gender. And of course, we all understand that gender is a non-binary concept now. In fact, a very huge, and evolving concept. So and sexual harassment ही नहीं, जो सक्षम रिपोर्ट है वो mental harassment in case of transgenders वगैरह भी recognize करती है. तो इन सब instances के लिए, unless you are proactive about your own rights, the state or the organization or anything, I don't believe they are going to help you unless you are aware of your own rights. So it is my humble, sincere request to everybody, not just talking to the law students from anybody, any organizations, any field, please be very conscious of what rights you have. Of course, I do understand that a lot of institutions do not take proactive measures in educating you about it, or talking about it, or don't even have an internal committee for that matter. But once you question that to the authorities, they will take it into notice that yes, people are talking about it and our students themselves are aware about it. So now we have to implement things. So questioning is very important when it comes to challenging an authority. In my opinion, the whole concept of having these 3 members in the UGC panel is a very proactive step, because बच्चों के साथ क्या problems होती हैं, especially now that social media आ गया है. अभी recently, if you guys are aware, Clubhouse पे भी बहुत ज़्यादा obnoxious material आ रहा है, and I have been there for a while, and I have been observing rooms that are very problematic. They do not know how to use the right terms. कुछ भी बोले जा रहे हैं, colonial terms चल रहे हैं, and all of that. So these are problematic areas. But what you need to understand is which authority do you question? Of course, there has to be one authority that has to censure people and take care of these events, that they are stopped or look into things that are problematic. But if you don't understand that you have rights, that is where you as a person are failing, right? If you are not aware कि आपके क्या rights हैं, IC क्या होती है, आपके sexual harassment क्या होता है, as I think Samanika rightly pointed out, that you should not wait for it to get ugly or bad. If something is making you feel uncomfortable and you're unsure of ये sexual harassment है या नहीं है, please say no to the perpetrator and at least make him aware of the fact that you're not going to tolerate this sort of behavior. That is very, very basic. Even when I train people, even adults, उनको भी ये बताना पड़ता है कि आपका पूरा right है कि you are not supposed to be harassed sexually or otherwise. If you're feeling something that is uncomfortable, of course managerial rights होते हैं, और checking up on work and even on students, अगर उनको checkup किया जा रहा है उनके assignments को लेकर, तो वो rights होते हैं of the faculty and the management and stuff. But at any point, do not let it cross a line. Do not wait for it to let it cross a line. If something makes you uncomfortable and you start questioning whether it is sexual harassment or not, most probably it is sexual harassment. So please, the first step that you can take is tell the perpetrator that I know my rights and this is not okay with me. So I'm not even sorry to confront about it, and please stop doing this behavior, so that he is aware that you are aware, or she is aware that you are aware of your rights. I think that is the very, very founding stone on which these laws can build blocks on. Once क्योंकि law बन के हवा में निकल जाए उससे कोई फायदा नहीं होगा, which is why there are mandatory requirements of spreading awareness. And much is being talked about कि हाँ, spreading awareness is very important, and talking about it is very important, but very, very few institutes or organizations are actually proactive in that sense. So I think there is a problem with it. But there is also hope with regard to appellate structures. Of course, dhire, as we develop, things will get better. People who are in authority will get stricter and understand कि कहाँ पे identify कर सकते हैं हम लोग वो structures को. But then again, repeating on that point, please be aware of, there is a local committee in every district. आप उनको approach कर सकते हैं, आप पुलिस में जा सकते हैं और complaint file कर सकते हैं. It is a punishable offense. आप National Commission for Women या State Commission for Women को लिख सकते हैं, आप Ministry of Women and Child Development को लिख सकते हैं. तो ये सारी 5-6 bodies हैं जिनके आप उनको contact कीजिए, and maybe there will be a redressal.
For people who cannot file a written complaint, is there a mode for them to file an online complaint, even for students for that matter? Is there a mode?
If you are asking in general terms of IC कि आप एक specific IC को online complaints लिख सकते हैं या नहीं, I think most ICs have their email addresses only put out. Very few ICs actually leak out the personal mobile numbers, or as Divya said, hotlines होती हैं. That is a very proactive step for an institution to have. Generally ये होता नहीं है. So you already have email IDs, and so whatever you are writing is on an email, or you are asking for assistance. Like in my case, when I sit on inquiries or what have you, कभी-कभी complaints ऐसी आती हैं कि पता ही नहीं है कि क्या हुआ. It's not really very well framed, because of course you don't understand and you're confused at that time. You don't remember क्या कब हुआ था, and you can't put all the elements of how this act has perpetrated and caused nuisance in your life in one small email. So what is important is that you know who to approach, and of course these IC members are under a duty to help you even draft a complaint. So be it online or offline or what have you, once you approach the authorities are duty bound to help you with drafting a complaint. So in case online, offline आप कैसे भी करो, complaint अगर जा रही है तो authority को बैठना पड़ेगा. It is a very smart step that organizations take कि वो email IDs देते हैं, so that everything is written and documented in that aspect. But of course, if you don't have that recourse and you're unsure of how to file your complaint or how to frame it, you can always approach your IC with a small email or a handwritten letter that, listen, I am facing some problems of sexual harassment and I would like a session with you. And then most of the organizations that I work with, our first session is to sit with the complainant and understand what has happened and see if the complaint that she or he has filed is enough for us to proceed upon. And if it is not, we often counsel them ki, oh ye aapne miss kar diya apne statement mein, do you want to write another complaint? We would sit on another complaint, but it is all documented. So very good practice is to actually do it online. I don't know, LC तो इतनी एक्टिव होती नहीं है. Of course you can find out local district officers होते हैं. I'm sure उनके email IDs भी होते हैं. I have not participated in a lot of districts. I have only participated in metropolitan cities, which I have found कि हाँ उनके email addresses होते हैं. But suppose I am from Meerut, which is a town in, not a town, a small city in UP. तो यहाँ पे मुझे नहीं पता अभी local officer कौन है. And I've tried finding out. So there are 2-3 bodies. District magistrate होता है, additional DM होता है, और 2 और posts होती हैं जिनके पास ये power होती है कि वो district officer बन पाएं. तो आप वो आइडेंटिफाई कीजिए कि कौन सी अथॉरिटी है जिनके पास ये पावर है कि वो डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफिसर बन पाए. आइडेंटिफाई हु इज द डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफिसर, एंड इफ यू आल्सो राइट अ कंप्लेंट टू द डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफिसर देमसेल्फ, दे विल आल्सो ट्राई टू हेल्प यू आउट. सो कहीं पे भी अगर आपका डॉक्यूमेंटेड है कि आपने किसी भी ऐसी अथॉरिटी को जो स्पेशली एम्पावर्ड है टू लुक over the implementation of POSH or the redressal of complaints or what have you, अगर आपने कहीं पे भी अप्रोच कर दिया है तो दे आर एक्चुअली ड्यूटी बाउंड टू हेल्प यू आउट. सो इट्स नॉट दैट हाँ लॉ है और कोई है नहीं आपका, you have no recourses, you don't know where to find out which are the bodies that are working on this issue and approach them and write to them. In most cases you will get a response. Even if you don't get a response, in the future you will have a paper to show that yes, I filed it in the timeline, because these are all time barred offenses. एक बार limitation period निकल जाता है तो आपके rights exhaust हो जाएंगे, and that itself is very very problematic in ensuring that justice is done. So my sincere request is that understand that this law is very very slowly evolving, and it is a huge nuisance. People are getting out of workforce because of this, and that is very very sad. And especially marginalized people like women or transgenders, when it happens to them, it is horribly sad. So you being conscious of your rights, you being aware of what bodies are working in this space is very very important. और आप किसी को भी approach कीजिए, उनसे पूछिए कि कहाँ जाऊँ redressal के लिए. अगर कुछ नहीं समझ में आता तो पुलिस में जाइए और वहाँ पे एक कंप्लेंट कर दीजिए और वो आपको हेल्प करेंगे, उनके ऊपर ड्यूटी है. So I think that is also one recourse that you can take. Of course, appellate body पे तो बहुत ही ज़्यादा dispute है, and we are also working into getting की how do you work upon this. So yeah, gray area, but we'll clarify in a while.
In fact, it was recently that Maharashtra government appointed the appellate authorities after so many years of passing the Posh Act. So I understand where you're coming from. I guess Samanika ma'am had a question for Divya ma'am.
Yeah, the question I've written in the chat box because it is related to a very famous organization. So I don't want to discuss the question openly. Divya, can you respond in the chat itself?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Meanwhile, I just wanted to add one thing to Kovida's point that most of the students, especially the ones who come from non-legal background and they don't know what comes under POSH and what doesn't come under POSH, for them, the moment you feel that there has been an incidence of harassment to you, which has happened, it is important that you start documenting. And like Kovida said, when you write an email, things come. Now in criminal law, the most important thing we learned in the first chapter is mens rea, right? We see to establish whether a criminal offense has happened or not, we check whether there has been an intention or not. So for that to happen, it is important from your side to take every step where you can prove mens rea in the near future. That recently it happened with one of my friend that she had filed a POSH complaint, and there were a lot of incidences which happened by her organization that it was very clear that they did not want to help her, right? There were so many failures at every step before ICC was formed or even ICC was formed that it kept on making her case stronger. So do not, if you're not getting any kind of support from the other organization where you're filing complaint, do not get disheartened. Rather, that will add up in your favor in the near future to prove the mens rea part. Because mostly what happens is, I was speaking to some of the leading managers of some top companies recently, and we were having this discussion after the LinkedIn posts and all. So they also told me the same thing, that Samanika, mostly क्या होता है ना, POSH complaint अगर आप ध्यान से देखो 80 to 90% केसेस में कॉर्पोरेट्स में ऐसे इंसान के ऊपर फाइल होगी who would be one of the key persons of that particular business. So from business point of view, the company always tries to protect that person, right? Because unke liye wo zyada important hai. For them, the business is more important, right? So when you complain to the corporate that these are the incidences what have happened, and then if the corporate does not take enough actions to protect you, that makes your case much more stronger. So even if you don't know कि मेरे posh के अंदर क्या क्या like what do I say मेरे पास क्या क्या options है, still start speaking out and start putting things in writing, because the more the failures from their end, the stronger you will be able to prove the mens rea. That's all.
I think there are two things that I would like to address. Of course, Samanika, all the points are very, very viable. जब हम mens rea बात करते हैं, when it comes to sexual, mens rea is immaterial. आपका जो भी intent हुआ हो, वो बातें बोलने का या वो actions करने का is immaterial. If the girl feels like she was like, for example, it is very easy for somebody to come and comment, oh, you're looking very hot today. Now this might not be, उसमें हो सकता है mens rea ना हो कि मैंने sexual harassment के लिए नहीं बोला, but the girl who suppose was wearing those pencil skirts, if she feels like अरे I am being objectified, and that too sexually कि hot बोल दिया मुझे, तो उसके ऊपर जो impact है कि वो एक ड्रेस पहनकर आई है, जो आपने कह दिया oh this is hot, उसको उसमें subscribe कर दिया कि just because you are hot today. So that is very, very material for people to understand कि mens rea material होता है when
Achha, COVID, I think you got me wrong. I was talking about mens rea on behalf of the corporate.
Implementation of the policy is not being done properly.
Yeah.
The right term to quote would be, mismanagement of the complaint.
Sorry, then my fault. Yeah.
Mismanagement of the complaint is very important aspect that Samanika pointed out, that if you have everything documented, when you reach the appellate stage, जो भी हो वो stage, आपके पास एक documentation. I was pursuing my right. These guys did not grant me enough, listening or enough remedy. So yes, a very, very good point made by Samantha कि documentation इन सब चीजों का आपके खुद के ऊपर भी होता है. Of course, in a lot of organizations, they don't even give you the report, on yourself. You will have to ask for them, and you have a right to ask for them. हर proceeding का आप अगर चाहें तो आप हर proceeding का वो written में दे सकते हैं कि I want the details of this proceeding and give me whatever reports you want. Each sitting that you take in these inquiry proceedings very well documented and have to be so by law. So very good point highlighted by Samanika. I think this is also very, very relevant for anybody who feels like they are not getting justice from the first stage authorities.
Could I just add something to what Kovida said? Just a little bit. Thank you, Kovida. It's really important for a practitioner to bring in these inputs. Something that I would like to say to especially the students who write to the ICCs. बहुत बार ऐसा होता है कि ICC, when you're dealing with it, it does constitute teachers and a hierarchy and authority where students become very hesitant to approach these authorities, because especially in educational institutions there is this teacher student staff student relationship which is very hierarchical. A lot of times you do not get documents. It is very important, and this is also for one provision here, which is of student representatives on an ICC. The whole point of these student representatives, or as the UGC calls them, gender champions, is they are an equal stakeholder within the ICC, and they have the right to participate. You can ask for documents. You can ask for a meeting to be clarified multiple times. You can ask for something that I have seen in organizations is a lot of students struggle with language. So if an ICC, I've sat through ICCs which are constituted in educational institutions in let's say Hyderabad or Bangalore, and the student who was even as as a respondent or a complainant, just because you're a respondent, there is principles of natural justice which entail fair hearing for everyone to be followed. So this ICC, which is composed of all these people from South India, is hearing an individual from this small town called Muradabad. And I know this, it is not a cultural, it is important in a country like India to keep these cultural contexts in mind. क्योंकि क्या होता है, I may be listening to everything a person has to say, but if as a victim or as a person who's responding to a complaint, even if you're a perpetrator and you've been brought in front of a committee, it is your right to clarify yourself, ask for help to make your position clearer. अगर आप documents मांगते हो, if you want a translator, if you want help from somebody to write your complaint down or write your response down, you can approach the ICC. Like the law, the UGC regulations and the rules give a fair amount of discretion to the ICC of an individual organization to help the individuals out, because it is a new and evolving law, as Kovida has also pointed out earlier. That can be a disadvantage and can be used to an advantage as well. So the students, in the sensitization endeavors that they have, or it is important to know your rights, and it is important and it is absolutely all right for a student to approach an ICC, not just to communicate about your complaint, but you can write to the ICC or the LCC, which is again not very active in most places, but in all practicalities, approach these organizations to want to ask about what your rights are. Just because you're a perpetrator or you are, or you're trying to justify yourself otherwise, whatever the case may be, I mean, the rights and obligations are very wide and you have the right to ask. So maybe start with a point of questioning first, because that is not done in a lot of universities. As I see it, also there's a lot of gap between universities and the administrative capabilities, because as an organization, I can tell you as an administrator, if you have limited resources to put in 50 places, you'll do rankings, internships, placements, and maybe sexual harassment is the last thing you'll do, or you'll focus your energies in if you have a budget. External trainers are not very cheap anymore, so that's the decision making that goes on for a university. So but it's all in place, and you also have to be aware of a few more things. We're all here telling you some very important tools, and for students who are in positions of power even within a university, if email IDs, numbers of ICC members, or information about how to get in touch with an organization is not displayed, ask where this information is. Maybe create tools for somebody else. Where is this information? It is a rule that it has to be displayed in every visited part of the university. While it's online, it has to be on the website. It is absolutely mandatory. Maybe make that information available if you're a student on par. Don't wait for fire to break out. Then when you start looking for information, let it all be there. Information, who to contact. Student representatives' names can be there, even if the ICC members, ideally, somebody who's the chairperson, the presiding officer, or someone who's responsible in a university environment. Universities are not like corporate universities. Try to make it accessible, the information, because it's students. A lot of students are minors, first years. They will have a completely different set of rights. It is a different, I mean, POXO will come into play then. As minors. So all of these things, there has to be a general area of information. So the law needs to be understood, but it needs to be starting at a very basic level, which currently in practical terms does not exist. Sexual harassment at workplace is not an area where you invest in as a university, as a resource, as a profit or a non-profit body, because we're a country that doesn't talk about it. We usually come to it when we will reach there, we discuss it. So if you're a student body, maybe because you work collaboratively, you can start somewhere else, is by spreading basics. At least know what an ICC is. I mean, Kovida and all the others, we've spoken about 100 terms. An ICC and LCC, who are these people? After how many point, usually when you have more than 10 employees, you go to an ICC and not an LCC. In most cases, these are basic things that are not required. So as a university, ask your university, who is in a university campus, the senior most female professor is the chairperson of the ICC. So maybe these are questions that need to be asked. In most universities, that senior most female faculty does not exist. So maybe these are the questions that need to be started asking. That's it. I know I've exceeded time to a large extent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing what we as students can do.
Last thing, Isha, I'm so sorry to cut you here. Just quickly, I'll add one thing that at NUJS, we used to have all the societies were student run. So, like most of you all were saying that in your college, either Posh is not taught or gender law is an optional subject and not everybody takes it very seriously. What you as students can also do is create a student community which talks about gender related issues. Because we had a gender society at NUJS and which was very, very active. They used to regularly conduct seminars or maybe workshops so to spread awareness. Now in such a scenario, like let's just imagine that a first year student comes to a college and is not even aware of these things, then at least he would be able to approach this society, the gender society, and take their help in understanding, because most of the time students are not comfortable with the faculty members who are part of these like committees and all, right? So then at least he would be able to reach out to the senior. So from student side, this is what one more thing you can do.
Completely understand. Now that we've all heard and acquainted ourselves with what we as students should do, quickly I'll ask a last question to all the three students and the recent graduates that we have. What you as students or what you as ex-students expect the employers to do to spread awareness regarding Posh or even universities?
So I would like to make a suggestion to the employers. So the first thing that a law student or any regular student who will be going for internships or will be getting their first jobs. So I would like to request to this platform to these employers is that just include one clause or just one pointer in the appointment letters or the offer letters or the internship confirmation letters that you guys have that kind of you have a redressal cell that is there to help them out, and not just simply just stating that sexual harassment is not tolerated in this all of that, but rather give them the newbies to just know how this thing works in their organization, so that it is very much clear on the face of it of a student or an graduate to get into these organizations and to do their due diligence as well. So I believe that this should be like the first thing that should be done on the part of employee. Yeah.
In fact, even conducting induction sessions for the newly joined interns is also very much necessary for them to be acquainted with the company's policy of sexual harassment. Yeah. Parishkriti and Trisha, would you like to share your insights on this?
Yeah, I actually. Oh, okay.
Yeah, please, Paresh.
I wanted to share one incident as well here. I think it is very important that there's sort of an accepting environment where recruiters accept that each intern is different. Because I remember there was this organization that I was working under, and the head, the partner of the firm was trying to be friendly in the sense that he was, because he knew that they were all students, so he used to say that, he used to explain that he used to have fun on the weekends and he used to go drinking and partying. So that was the language he used to speak up. But I think I was one of the ones who got a bit uncomfortable with those sort of conversations in a professional environment. So I did try to reach out to one or two people, but I think the response that I got from them was mainly that you need to chill a bit. Yeah, it's a very comfortable sort of a thing, and it's not really a big deal. So I think this is something that I would really want, that if there's an issue that is coming up to you, maybe just not sort of ridicule it away or just ignore that thing.
I think that is a very big problem. Gaslighting of victims is just, it's not acceptable. I think employers, administrators, management, anybody, if you are listening to this, please understand, if somebody is complaining, gaslighting a victim is the biggest no-no that I preach. And it's just completely unethical. I don't think you should not be allowed to run a business if you're conducting yourself in that manner. I'm sorry.
Understand, ma'am. In fact, the notion of instantly blaming the victim and questioning her actions also need to be avoided, because what it does is it also, at subconscious mind, it also makes the victim question, was she at fault, or was he at fault?
Exactly. That was what happened. I thought that nobody else is questioning. Maybe I am being a bit stuck up here and I need to loosen up a bit. But then what I realized was this is a professional environment. I don't need to have friends here. And if I'm not comfortable, I'll just stop being there in the meetings.
Correct. Now we have a question from the participant. I know it's already answered on the chat box, but it would be great. It would be of a great help if we answer it again here, so that everybody who's joined us on YouTube will also be able to learn what it means. One question, we have a question from Dr. Ashok, who asks, do we have any manual on Posh for students of school and higher education? Do we have a manual in place?
Yes, we do. There are two actually. There are UGC guidelines which were released in, I think, 2016, May 2016 maybe. Notified on 2nd May 2016. Along with that, we also have the Saksham report, which talks about or elaborates upon how it is not just limited to women, and they also talk about transgender rights and stuff like that. So yes, there are two specifically for students in higher education institutes. Of course, you also have to acquaint yourself with the Posh Act, which is Prohibition, Prevention and Redressal of Sexual Harassment at Workplace of Women. That was a 2013 legislation. You can Google it, you'll find it in PDF. And then, of course, there are obviously a lot of guidelines. There are rules that were implemented by the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare. I think if you sufficiently go through these 4 texts, you will have an idea of what exactly we are talking about. If you further want to educate yourself, you will have to keep abreast with the judgments that are coming on from higher judicial authorities, and even these district level courts that are adjudicating upon instances like MJ Akbar judgment or recent Tarun Tejpal judgment, which I do not approve of, but still, you might as well. If you are very, very into educating yourself, these are very, very recent implementations that have come in regards to Posh Act.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. With this, now we come to the end of the session. As we all have acquainted ourselves, we've got to know that it is evident that sexual harassment at workplace can no longer be viewed just as a moral transgression. The Vishaka guidelines, be it, or Posh Act or the UGC regulations, have definitely raised that bar. And although it is a difficult task to deal with the challenges of the implementing the act, I believe that a collective effort of everyone to build a safe working environment is very imperative. And I hope that this discussion has helped the students and the employers to gain some insights over what is the procedure that needs to be followed, or what are the remedies available to them. I once again thank all the wonderful panelists for joining with us here, and sharing your insights and sharing with us your valuable knowledge. Thank you, everyone. It was great to have you with us, and thank you to all the participants, be it on YouTube or Zoom, for being such supportive and being so interactive with us. I hope this session has helped you today. Thank you.
Thank you for having this, by the way. It was a